Welcome to a brief overview on how GIS models suggest the most sustainable placements for wind farms. Hello everyone, my name is Jeffrey Jose Carrillo Garcia. I'm a graduate student at the University of Colorado Boulder studying chemical engineering, and today we are going to go over how GIS models create maps that help city planners identify the most suitable locations for certain types of building structures to be built, and how these GIS models give insight into an environmental and economic sustainable future in terms of energy production. We will dive into what variables, otherwise known as suitability maps, and how they tell us insightful information about different geographical parameters, and how GIS models input these suitability maps or different geographical parameters to infer the most suitable placement for a wind farm. Alright, so let's go over the learning objectives, or what you should be able to do at the end of the video. At the end of the video, I should be able to describe a geographic information system, or GIS for short, is. I will use the abbreviation for the remainder of the video. Understand why GIS models are important for economic and environmental sustainability. Describe what different variables, or otherwise known as suitability maps, go into a GIS model. Understand how suitability maps are derived, and understand why the specific suitability maps used in a GIS model for wind farms tell us important information on the most sustainable placement for wind farms or a wind farm. Let's get to it. So what is a GIS model? So take a look on the map to the right. This map and legend was created using a GIS model. GIS models take many data sets of geographical spatial information and uses statistical analysis tools to layer these different layers on top of each other, and thus creating a map that scores the physical land area for the best placement of a building structure. For example, a GIS model can also tell you about the best placement for a new stadium for your favorite team based on information like population density or distance to roads and so on. Why are GIS models important for environmental and economic sustainability? These GIS models can adequately tell us where to build wind farms based on geographical information that we will go over in a bit. For now, let's focus on why there is a need for building wind farms to keep our environment and economy stable well into the future. It's commonly known that shifting our energy dependence will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we are pumping into our atmosphere. Wind farms are free, renewable sources of energy that do not have the same effects that greenhouse gases have on our atmosphere. Shifting our energy dependence to renewable sources of energy, such as wind farms, then we would be protecting our environment by reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that we are pumping into our atmosphere, ultimately driving climate change down. Also, let's take a look here on the right-hand side. There are some statistics on the macroscopic economic impact of a wind farm located in a rural community in the state of Colorado. During its construction phase, it created a bit under 3,000 jobs and a GDP of $280 million. During its operational phase, it created 180 jobs and a GDP of $20 million. Let's take a look at the economic impacts for the people that were or are working at the specific wind farm. So this wind farm created jobs that are paid on average a salary of upwards of $50,000. So the building of wind farm has demonstrated a positive impact on the state's economy. So who wouldn't want an engineer, earning $80,000 a year and making the world a better place, the world a more sustainable place? Let's go back to the map we saw earlier in the video. How are these maps made? In theory, it's not that hard to see the logic as to how GIS models are built. GIS models take different maps that categorize single varied geographical spatial information by ranks. These maps are called suitability maps, and they are ranked by how suitable it would be to place a building structure on the map. This sounds a bit abstract, so let's talk through an example. Imagine you are planning to build a mall and you are looking at suitability maps. An insightful suitability map might be one of population density. The rank for the suitability map might be that higher population density is better than lower population density, because you want the mall to be economically sustained. Thus, a bigger population density infers more mall traffic, boosting your sales. Moving forward, how do GIS models work with suitability maps? GIS models take suitability maps and then run statistical tests to relate the different suitability maps together. A little nice way to think about it is maps on maps on maps on maps as depicted to the left, because that is what a GIS model essentially does. Through statistical operation, it layers these maps to ultimately come up with a suitability map that is a mix of all the other previous suitability maps. Moving forward, let's apply our newly gained knowledge on how GIS models are created to see what factors are important for the placement of a wind farm in the most economic and environmentally sustainable ways. What might be some geographical factors that researchers consider when looking at the most sustainable placement of these wind farms? Some things to keep in mind are: think about how these geographical factors impact economic and environmental sustainability. For economic sustainability, how can sustainability tell us information about minimizing cost? For environmental sustainability, think about how can suitability maps tell us information about where to build a wind farm with the least impact to the environment or ambient conditions. Now let's take a look at different suitability maps for wind farms and how they are ranked to tell us the most economic and environmentally sustainable placement of a wind farm. To the left are different suitability maps that are ranked with a legend that goes from dark to light shading, indicating that darker shades are excellent conditions for a wind farm. Of course, wind potential scores or wind speeds are important to look at. The faster the better because it produces more power, thus more energy, and is an incentive for the environmental and economical sustainability. Moving on, the further away the wind farm is placed from a city, the better for this GIS model. Cities are big and so are wind farms, and we don't want to live in a really crowded city. Third bullet point, ideal land cover. What is ideal land cover? Ideal land cover is whether the land is covered with physical things that would make the construction of the wind farm hard or not. Is it easier to build a wind farm on a mountain with steep hills and a lot of forestry, or in the plains where it's flat and the vegetation is short? We would want to build our wind farm where it's flat and easier to build. Moving on, the closer a wind farm is built to transmission lines, the better. Less resources are spent on getting the energy produced by the wind farm to a powered line grid system. Moving forward, population density follows a similar train of thought to distance from cities where lower population density is better. Moving on to federal landmass, we don't want to build a wind farm on federally protected land. We want to keep our national forest parks as untouched as possible. Lastly, wind farms located closer to roads is better because the working staff spend less time on commuting to work. We have arrived at the end of the video. So what did we learn from this video? We learned what a GIS model is and how it is used to infer the most suitable locations for new building structures, how a wind farm in Colorado has had a positive impact in the state's economy, what the variable inputs or suitability maps are for a GIS model and how they are determined, and lastly, how suitability maps for wind farms are selected. As one of my good chemical engineering professors would say, thanks for watching.